This is Dr. Keith Rosen Knives in on the inaugural podcast of the Scalpel. Why do I call it the Scalpel? Well, you see, I'm a surgeon. Actually, I'm a plastic surgeon. And I've spent a lot of time traveling the world, operating, training other surgeons, learning about other societies, and quite frankly, learning more about my own. While I was raised and growing up, you see, I'm 54 years old. I feel like I grew up in a golden time, back when we used to actually have to dial the phone and not just pick it up in our hand and use our thumbs and punch some numbers to get in touch with someone. I tell my children today that, they can just text someone to see if they want to talk to them. When I was a kid growing up, not so much. I had to actually call. And if I wanted to talk to a girl, I had to get through her parents to actually get to her. Because you see, our phones were connected to the wall. My children don't even understand that. They can't even imagine how a phone would actually be connected to an object and you couldn't actually put it in your pocket. But that was the time I grew up in. Time a lot of us grew up in. You see, I grew up learning about history and experience. But what I'm witnessing today is revisionist history and experience. And it gives me a cause for great concern. I live here in South Texas, and I used to occasionally host a radio show when the actual host was sick, wanted to take a vacation. So for the past 19 years, occasionally, a few times a year, once, twice, maybe 3 times, he would say, "Hey, can you host the show for me?" So as I was on the radio, I would do a lot of prep. And during that prep, I would read. I'm a voracious reader. I enjoy reading. My kids, half of them like to read, half of them don't like to read. One of them one time came up to me and goes, "Dad, what are you doing?" I go, "I'm reading." He goes, "What's that?" And I go, "It's a book. It has words. It's pretty cool." He goes, "I don't like to read." I said, "You look at your phone. Those are words you're reading." He walked off puzzled. He was very young. He'll get it as he grows older. But what I hope that everyone gets is that history and experience are what will propel us and teach us. And as a plastic surgeon, one of the things that I like to talk about is symmetry versus asymmetry. Part of training surgeons for the past 15 to 20 years, I get to travel to a lot of countries, and I got to spend the better part of a decade working in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I worked with several different groups, and the surgeries I mainly did were cleft lips and palates. You see, if a child is born with an asymmetrical lip, that means one side doesn't look like the other, the parents would like that fixed. And in certain societies, certain socioeconomic groups, or just folks that, for whatever reason, genetically or otherwise, have a child with the cleft lip, they want it fixed. Here in the United States, we have wonderful children's hospitals, and if someone's born with the cleft lip, they get repaired pretty fast. However, living in a country that may not have access to such health care, a child with a cleft lip that isn't repaired may get bullied, picked on, maybe an outcast in that society. So having those fixed is important. So the parents will bring me that child with the cleft lip, and it's asymmetrical, and I fix it. And I try to give it symmetry. You see, that symmetry with that cleft lip is important, because if one side looks like another, then the child can go on, get married, have a career, and be accepted into society. You see, symmetry and asymmetry matters. I like to read, and like I mentioned earlier, and one of the gentlemen I read is a man named Victor Davis Hanson, and has symbols rule substance, or as the brilliant Victor Davis Hanson stated, chasing symbols, ignoring reality. You see, when I bring symmetry to a lip, I think that's a good thing. If I were a liberal, however, and a person brought me a patient with a cleft lip, I would look at that patient and go, that's an asymmetrical lip. That lip is fine. I would actually look at the parent and make them feel bad that they had symmetrical lips. I would ask them if they're willing to have a surgery to change their lip to match the child that has the asymmetrical lip, and shame them for getting upset with the child with the asymmetry. You see, that's what we're seeing in society today. We're seeing people that don't believe in actual symmetry, actual normalness. We have an entire party that has dedicated itself to changing the symmetry of our country into an asymmetrical country that is not based on its founding documents that we hold so dearly, or that most of us, I pray, hold so dearly. And I believe we're at a real tipping point in our nation. We've exhausted that last lever at the ballot box with the election of Donald J. Trump. Wherever you stand, Republican or Democrat, one thing is for certain. The American people elected President Trump. As a conservative constitutional conscience of America, which I like to think of as the true silent majority, waits and observes, the forces of unfettered progressivism and the global elitist agenda are blown up like this giant Macy's Day float and are continually hoisted upon a wary electorate. Gone are the subtle head fakes to liberal ideology with the false pretense of doing the will of the people. I've been watching the Democrat debates. They don't even try to trick you anymore. They don't even try to make you think they're going to do the right thing. They're out trying to give more stuff away. They're out trying to promise more things they know they can never deliver on. No, our political class, media, and intellectual elites have tossed off any veil of pretense and are moving full speed to overload and defeat the will of the American people for their own good, as perceived by these masterminds. This is not the first time this tragic film has played in history. History is replete with multiple reruns of socialism, utopian fantasies, where a few elite masterminds decide what is good and right for the masses. Each run of this series always ends in death, destruction, and the dissolving of the civil society. Look at history. 240 years ago, 56 men, over actually 240 years ago, I think it's about 243 years ago now, 56 men decided to flip the script. They realized that their rights did not come from man, but were inalienable. That is, God-given. As such, they can never be infringed or removed. Today, after years of carefully placed insurgents in our education system, the media, and an ever-growing federal leviathan that we all call the bureaucracy, the same tragic film is trying to make a comeback. The American people still reject the progressive agenda outright, but the national megaphone of the fake news media and the power-hungry, honorless, that's right, I said it, honorless politicians are pushing this country to a concerning crescendo. Will America restore the rule of law, protect its borders, honor the Constitution, and shrink and rein in an out-of-control federal bureaucracy that is just destroying our country? Or will the withering barrage of 24/7 fake news and propaganda supporting the spineless politicians while they are controlled by all the special interests seize the day? I really pray it's not too late. I believe there's a way forward. It will be paved with the recognition of history and experience. It will include accountability and the reinstatement of honor in our leadership. It won't be easy, but if you look at the history of our country, has it ever? You know, when I think about this and I think about everything that's going on, I besides liking to read, I love to write. And when I see what's happening with journalism, I started reading a book, Unfreedom of the Press by Mark Levin. If you want to hear a great podcast, turn mine off right now and go to his, because you'll get more meat and potatoes in the first 10 minutes of his than you will in 99% of the other podcasts in this country. The guy's a brilliant man, and he's written an outstanding book, Unfreedom of the Press. I live in South Texas. There are a lot of Democrats and liberals here in South Texas, and the only reason that I'm behind this microphone right now is to get out the word of freedom, of liberty, of history, of experience. So anything I read, anything I come across, if I think it's worthwhile, I'm going to tell you about it. If you get nothing from this podcast today, go get that book. I'm really enjoying reading that book, but I got to tell you, I recognize this, and I'm sure Mr. Levin recognized it way before I did, several years ago. And when I was on the radio, I actually wrote an obituary for journalism. I wrote it kind of as a cathartic exercise, but then I thought, what the heck? I get to host a show. I can do what I want. Well, now this is my podcast. I guess I get to do what I want. So I'm going to give you my obituary for journalism, because I believe the asymmetry we're seeing in this country today is empowered by the mainstream media. I think the clown car, now car's not a good word, the clown bus of Democrat presidential candidates are fueled and the road is paved by the mainstream media. So I wrote this obituary for journalism because I don't think we really have journalists anymore. The obituary goes, journalism has perished. Journalists have traded research, scholarship, and investigative and source development in for a quick, Pop-Tart, fast food literary fix where the premise is established prior to the story. Journalists no longer report the news, but create the narrative. They cherry-pick events and experience from which they craft a focused, targeted piece designed to further an ideology at the expense of truth and reality. They have formed a garage sale Faustian bargain where they sold their soul not for knowledge and understanding, but for the admittance into the elite world of progressive fetishes and self-congratulatory expression. They are no longer as arbiters of the truth, but the guardian of the sophisticated schemes to subjugate the masses to their utopian fantasies. Simply, they have reduced their respected craft to a bargain basement, buy one, get my soul for free sale. While the near passing of such a storied profession should cause this great nation pause, we have no time to grieve because instead of going quietly into the night, they have birthed the new modern-day media, where journalists have been transformed into a Praetorian Guard for a failed ideology that only survives by the lifeline provided by their creative reporting. This new media has formed a toxic, symbiotic relationship with its new host organism, the progressive elite. It no longer promotes the expansion of knowledge and truth, but the destruction of history and experience, paving the highway to tyranny. The Scalpel supports veterans and veteran-owned companies, and I want to tell you about an amazing company, Flipside Canvas. Flipside Canvas is a premium art company, veteran-owned and operated by Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer. Flipside's art is proudly made in Austin, Texas. That's right, America, with materials and parts 100% sourced in America. They even offer a 100% lifetime guarantee on their canvases, ranging from hundreds of designs from their Jocko Willink collection, Pipe Pewters Union, patriotic and inspiring art for your home or office. New designs are updated every single day. Let me just tell you, folks, if you really want to boil this down, this is badass art made by American badasses. And I think it's great. So visit Flipside Canvas. Go to flipsidecanvas.com. If you like what you see, get yours today and get 30% off your first order. Flipside Canvas. They're not decorations, they're declarations. Speaking of a highway that's paved to tyranny, let's look at some of these vehicles that are on that highway. And the first one I look at is what I call the clown bus. The clown bus is where all those Democrat candidates are right now that are running for president of the United States. Like I talked about earlier, they're not trying to hide themselves anymore. They're not trying to slip in and make you think one thing and do another. No, they've gone full liberal. And as I watched the debates last week, and I'm sure everyone else did, and they've seen the clips, I tried to hone in on who would be the front runners and who wouldn't. And I got to confess, I kind of enjoyed watching the circular firing squad actually take formation. The leading candidate out there, according to the mainstream media, is Joe Biden. And believe me, we're going to unpack Joe Biden over some episodes, and we'll have a lot of fun with him because old Joe's been in politics for a long time. I mean, I actually went back and looked at clips of Joe when he had hair, then he didn't have hair, now he has hair again. Now, as a plastic surgeon, I do cosmetic surgery too. I guess that a whole plugs, hair transplant thing's working for him. So I figured he was the front runner because he is the establishment progressive candidate. So there's going to be others that take shots of him. You see, to be a Democrat candidate, you got to not only be progressive and liberal, you got to be intersectional. You got to be more than just a candidate. I mean, Joe's white. That's not in dispute. Now, there's another candidate that's pretty popular. Her name is Kamala Harris. And I thought it was very interesting to watch Kamala Harris take a script right out of old Joe's playbook and flip it on him. What am I talking about? Well, let's go back to the debate, the one they just had, where Kamala decided to talk about old Joe. Cut one, go.
Is a racist, but the average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in the United States.
Ms. Williamson, thank you.
Stop just a second there. Let me set up this clip for you. They're at the Democrat debate. You've seen it. That was Rachel Maddow. She starts the question saying the average, not a question. Remember, journalism is dead. She starts with the statement. The average American is woefully, basically undereducated, or not woke, if I'm using the correct terminology, she didn't use it, about racism. Now, again, I'm 54 years old. I've seen incidents of racism, just as I've seen incidents of stupidity. What I haven't seen is systemic racism. But that doesn't matter here, you see, because it's not about the truth. It's not about the symmetry. It's about the asymmetry. So right off the bat, this is not a question from a moderator. She's basically polishing the ball, setting it on the tee, and handing Kamala Big Bertha, and Kamala can't wait to hit it. Continue the cut.
We'll give you 30 seconds of this. We're going to come back to you on this again in just a moment. Go for 30 seconds.
Okay. So on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination.
Stop. There's not a black person. She said black man. Now, she's not woke, because I think you're supposed to say person now. I don't know. But there's not a black man she knows that hasn't been the victim of discrimination. Well, I don't know, except maybe that guy she had an affair with, that famous politician, Willie Brown or something like that. I don't know. I'm sure Willie has too. But Kamala doesn't know anyone that hasn't been a victim. You see, she's speaking what she thinks you want to hear. She's speaking as a liberal candidate because they don't talk to people. They talk to victims. And if you aren't a victim, give it time. They'll create one for you. Keep the cut going.
Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black.
Okay, stop. I'm sorry I keep interrupting, but my sister and I, and she gets a quiver in her voice, and if you're actually watching this, you can see she's trying to get upset. Now, Ms. Harris, I did a little research on you, okay? I know your background. Your father was a professor, graduate student, then a professor at Stanford, I believe. He's from Jamaica. Your mother's from, let's just keep it simple, India, or country in and around. And it didn't appear that you were struggling too much based on your own biography and Wikipedia, but I'll let you continue. Go on.
Say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist.
Stop. I love it when someone goes, they start something, I'm going to direct this at Biden. Okay. I spend a lot of time around a lot of people. I teach something called tactical medicine. And when you direct something, like let's say direct fire, you point it at them. So she's going to point something here at President Biden. And she starts out, I don't believe you're a racist. But, continue.
I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. Mm-hmm. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful.
Stop. Again, let's stick to the facts, but she has to bring feelings. First, you have to bring victimization in, and then you got to bring feelings in, because you can't be a candidate for the Democrat Party without feelings and victims. Keep going.
Talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second...
So, in California, but she meant California. She couldn't decide whether California. Go ahead. It's just grammar.
...integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Stop. She was a victim. She was in second grade. Now, that's what everyone heard. That's what everyone saw. I can hear her voice quivering. I would almost feel bad for her if I didn't know the moment she said that. I bet you, and in fact, I'm pretty sure her campaign launched out on Instagram a picture of her when she was a little girl in pigtails. You got to see, she was just a little girl. And Joe Biden must have supported those evil senators because she said he did. Now, I'm going to do something I rarely ever do. I'm going to defend Joe Biden. She took a small situation and completely flipped the premise to further her political ambition. Now, this was a young girl in second grade. Well, I have a daughter. She's 10 now. In second grade, most kids are 7 to 8 years old in the United States when they're in second grade. And looking at Kamala Harris as one of the Wikipedia pages for her, talks about her life, says she moved to Canada with her mother when she was 7. So first of all, I'm not saying she wasn't bused in second grade, but she didn't stay there long, number one, because she moved to Canada. Number two, I don't think she's very much a student of history and experience, because I can remember Slate having an article where the Gallup poll at the time said that 77% of blacks at that time were against busing. So Vice President Biden, or wannabe President Biden, back in the day when he was Senator Biden, was actually responding to 77% of the black population was against busing. But right now, Kamala's using it to make herself a victim. And she's mischaracterizing someone who is the king of mischaracterization. So it's kind of funny in that way. So anyway, you got Kamala. She's got a quivering voice. When she was in second grade, I think they'll probably, if we ever find anyone with good journalistic instincts, will go out and find out more about Kamala and find out the actual truth. I'm sure she probably was bused. I'll give her that. But the majority of folks, according to the Gallup poll back then, blacks were against busing, and there are some good reasons why. And actually, President Biden was on that side. But that's not important right now, because you see they're fighting against each other to be the candidate to run against Donald Trump. So she's willing to say anything. But you know, the reason I talked about at the beginning is I think she got this page straight from Vice President Biden's playbook. But let's hear Biden's response to this first, because it'll set everything up for me. Cut 2, go.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true, number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, stop. Biden says you mischaracterized his comments, and you know what? She did. Biden did not support busing, but he didn't come out in vocal, large support for those racist senators that she's talking about. He didn't do it. She just tried to tie them together. She tried to tie an event and put words without the full context of everything in Biden's mouth. Now, Biden knows a lot about that technique. He knows a lot about how to fight politically, because he just, before that, I don't know, a month or recently announced his run for president. Let's listen to his first ad announcing that he's running for president.
Charlottesville, Virginia is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there on August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides.
Go ahead and stop. Oh my gosh, Joe. You started your presidential campaign with a lie. Because when President Trump said there were very good people on both sides, you know good and well that he also said he was talking about the folks that were there with the protest of the statue. There were some people protesting for, some people protesting against, and that's what he was talking about. He actually condemned the neo-Nazis and the racists and the Antifa. You know, Joe, the same way you condemned those senators. But Kamala saw you do it in your run for president, so she thought, hey, that works pretty well. Let me set him up in the debate. And Joe, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. You're just a tool. And she got you hook, line, and sinker. And so when you said she mischaracterized you, you're absolutely correct. You know, kind of like you mischaracterized our president. And that's why I call it the clown bus. There's a lot more that happened this past week, but I don't even think it's that important. It was a circular firing squad. You had people promising more and more stuff. You have Joe Biden talking about the Declaration of Independence in his opening ad to declare his candidacy. Yet in a debate, you had every single one talking about Declaration of Dependence, because that's where the liberals want us. They want us dependent. They want us dependent on government. They want us dependent on their ideas, and they want to further push us off the cliff. But you know what? We have a president who actually sees truth for truth. And we have an American electorate that, using liberal terms, is woke. Just not woke the way they want it to be. And I believe that's going to make a difference in all of our lives, because people are going to understand the difference between freedom and free stuff, between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. And that's what we're going to talk about day after day after day. And people are going to give us a lot of material to talk about, and I'm going to be here to keep them honest. There are a lot of great guys out there, and I don't even want to say I'm throwing my hat in the ring, because I actually wear a surgical hat and work all the time. So I'm just going to get up early, knock out this podcast in the morning, and then hopefully it'll add some value during the day to anyone that wants to listen to it, because I care about this country, and I'm no longer going to be silent. There's going to be a lot more. Podcast will probably run longer. I'll actually have more time for prep and to be able to bring things to you, but I couldn't step off this podcast without a little humor. And unfortunately, I am from the great state of Texas. Unfortunately, there's someone running for president by the name of Beto O'Rourke. He's running for president too. Now, Beto was in the debate. Beto got shellacked. Don't take my word for it. Go back and look at the videos. But you know what I love about Beto? Beto is Beto's biggest fan. I like to call him the Irish Mexican, because he's not Mexican. He's Irish. Now, I do know a little bit about Mexicans because I am married to a beautiful, lovely Latina Mexican woman. She was born in Mexico. She's a legal citizen here. My mother-in-law, mi suegra, Beto, is from Mexico. She's a legal resident here. She doesn't even speak English. I speak Spanish, so I really enjoyed you pandering. But you know what I enjoy more about Beto and a lot of liberals? They like to grade themselves. See, they don't want you to grade them. They'll tell you what to think. They'll even tell you how well they did. So I was digging through, doing some prep, and I saw Beto had a response for how he did. A reporter actually asked him, "So, Beto, how did you think you did?" Now, I can tell you the pundits out there on both sides of the aisle said Beto got slammed. he's going to go down in the polls. But Beto, he had a little different opinion. Cut 4, go.
To make sure that we meet the greatest challenges we've ever faced.
Okay, but what grade would you give yourself for last night?
I'd give myself an A. I wanted to make sure that I got that point across. I described why I'm doing this, who I'm doing it for, the people that inspire me, how we're going to meet these challenges. And I felt like I was able to get that across.
Okay, Beto. Okay, Beto gave himself an A. Shaw, of course, he felt it. Oh, I feel like I gave myself an A. I mean, an A is good, right? Like Donald Trump is like a D, so A's before D. And yeah, like Joe Biden's a B, so yeah, I would definitely be Biden. I bet A. I gave myself an A. Shaw, totally. I'm going to go jump a skateboard and put more signs in yards and pass out some stickers at some colleges and make everyone feel good about themselves. Oh my gosh. What a blithering idiot. You know, Texas, El Paso, we burped up Beto. Pay attention. Him running for president's one of the greatest gifts you've ever been given because you can actually see who he is, which means you can see right through him because he's a transparent person. Transparent because he has no substance. And it's time to get back to substance. It's time to get back to the founding. It's time to get back to what made this country great. It's time to get back to freedom. I appreciate you hanging out with me this morning. This is Dr. Keith Rose and Knives the producer. And we'll get to knives because this is called the Scalpel and every good surgeon has his knife. So Knife, why don't you say hi?
Hey, everybody. It's good to be here.
Knives and I have been working on this for a while. This is kind of a test run for us, but we'll probably stick it out there for everyone to throw knives at. No pun intended. But we appreciate you being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you tomorrow. From Dr. Rose and Knives, God bless America, and let's keep freedom rolling.